Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
So I suppose we should just start with this. Can you tell us more about what we see before us, this beautiful artwork?
Oh, okay. That's sort of a leading question, and it's a big question. Okay, so this actually, physically, I'm creating a suite of works for the National Gallery of Australia, for Canberra, for a project that I'm doing. And but I have been working with fire and water and the elements for some years, because at the centre of my concerns about art, actually I'm going to start at the very beginning, because it's kind of like, how long is this piece of string?
Time. You know. Yeah.
But it essentially, all of my work was born out of a really difficult and painful question, which is, what the fuck is this that exists? Simple question. And that question gets born out of the facts that, I've got this Chinese face in what was predominantly considered a white culture, and that was Queensland, and growing up in the 50s, 60s and 70s. So you have to remember the White Australia policy didn't end until 73 or something, which is very recent. And that policy was deliberately against the Chinese and Asians. So this may seem like a very long journey to why the friggin' hell is she doing fire drawings? But the journey starts always with this question in your heart, okay, especially if you're an artist. There's always this little tearing that says that you're both same and different, and somehow it hurts. And it's your treasure. So I imagine many of you in this room know this. So this little sacred splinter, it's often called, starts to grow, and it grew in this little girl's soul because she didn't quite understand why she felt so displaced in this world. But of course, this question is a very human question, and it is our joint treasure, actually. So my sense is that our lives are about coming to understand why it is that we exist. So, travelling along, I become an art student. I have no idea how to make art. The worst, those of you who are artists in this room, the most confronting question, especially when you're young, is you come to that blank canvas and it's like, now what? I have struggled so hard to make this space in my life to do this. And I don't know what to do. Anyway, skipping right along, because there's a lot of interrogation, but I used to teach a lot, and I used to say that the thing that you have to connect with most deeply is what you love. So how you love and what you love is your deepest and most profound connection to the world. And so start from that. Anyway, I'm trying to, because I'm an old person now, I'm in my 60s, so I'm trying to, reduce this 40-year career down into, how did I come to this? Okay, right. So all of my early work was very much about, trying to measure my sense of belonging or not belonging. And again, this is a very deeply human question. And even if you're not Chinese growing up in a white Australia policy situation, each of us will come to this question no matter what. Anyway, so I started to interrogate the fact that, I felt very Western in this body. And then I found myself at this conference where they were sort of saying, well, was it really about Australia and China? And I kept saying, but I'm really Western. Why are you guys asking me? My whole practice is about aligning myself with the West. And I actually spoke those words at this conference. I said, I kind of don't get why I'm here in a sense, because, my belonging is to the West. And as soon as I said those words, it was like, wait a minute, anybody who has to say they belong don't belong. There's if you belong, there's no question. So it just really flipped me, and I thought that I really, because sincerity is a very important part of art practice, okay? Fun and sincerity together, intimate. So it really flipped me. It was like, I really went, oh shit, this is something really important, this sense of belonging and not belonging. And so I started to think about my ancestral roots. I started to work with imagery from ancient China and my family. And most importantly, I became very interested. In fact, Zen was pushed into my face, and I had to succumb, I had to surrender actually to this ancient tradition. And that's another story, and maybe we talk about that. And of course, you know, the question of who am I, which is the normal existential human question, within meditation expands to something much bigger. This self, of course, is bigger than it goes beyond the boundaries of what this is. You know, I often like to describe, you know, if I threw a tennis ball, you know, where does the action of me begin and end? You know, in that throw, does it finish there? No, the effect ripples out into the world, the universe, the cosmos. And so equally, the world ripples into us. So that's, for me, the benefit of meditation, of sitting still, of reaching these, being in these places, because that is our home. And so I just began, you know, so that question about who am I, which was actually very painful, became expanded more into, but what is this that exists? Not just who am I, I'm just this little locus here, you know, but what is it genuinely that exists? And as one sits, as one goes into retreat, does all of these stupid things, like who the hell sits still for 9 hours a day? It's ridiculous, you know, and how come we're still doing it? But you come to, you know, as I say, that the connections between you and cosmos, one begins to understand experientially, it's not just in your head, is that cosmos, as I don't know any other word to describe it, you can call it anything you want, is deeply connected to what we are, is deeply what we are. And in fact, it constructs what we are. And we can never step outside of cosmos, ever. One famous Zen Roshi said, and curiously, nobody has ever fallen out of this universe. And that must be something of a comfort, fortunately, you know. So, you know, it's just this sense that, yes, we are impermanent, and that's the nature of things. But this impermanence is this eternally occurring causation of form and emptiness and coming into being, and each of us holds up the sky in that. Each of us is intrinsic to this process called cosmos. So why do I do these fire drawings and rain drawings? Is somehow it's a meditation for a start. It's very repetitive. And by the way, I have a team who helped me to do this because it's a lot of work. So, but it is this process of meditation, of coming into this moment. But also, because I'm a Zen student, I work with koans, and this koan is really about the fire of life, the fire of being. It is literally burnt, but it's also literally about this fire that is alive within us. So when I'm doing these works, I'm working through that kind of stuff. Does that make sense now?
Totally.
Okay.
So when did you fall in love with the idea of being an artist?
Oh, I think I was 3, and I didn't remember this story until somebody asked me that, you know, a while back. And I realised I lived in Kangaroo Point in Brisbane, and we lived in this little Queenslander house, and there was a veranda, and there's, you know, light streaming in. And you know those dust motes that really magically float? And as a kid, that is magic. And that magic is because you're absolutely intimate with that moment. There's nothing between you and that dust mote. And it's wonder. And so I'm there on my tummy, you know, drawing stick figures and looking at these dust motes and just thinking, how magical would it be to be able to capture that? And I only remember that now because I think now, in 60-something years later, I think I'm beginning to work with the magic of those dust motes and stuff. But it was a long journey, and I have been, I actually think it's really hard to be an artist. It has to be the only thing that you can do. It's like I'm useless. It's the only thing I can do. I failed maths. I really did. And it's a point of pride now, by the way, because my maths teacher said to me, "Lindy Lee, all Chinese girls are good at maths, why aren't you?" And I went, "Not this little bunny." And I literally got 14% after that. It's like, no. But really, I say that it's funny, but it was actually quite painful because it was kind of like, like being put into a box, being, and knowing this is not right somehow. And one's little act of defiance is actually a bit of self-harm, by the way. Dad didn't like that, but nonetheless. So, yeah, it's just that the life of an artist is an up and down, windy thing, and it works beautifully sometimes, and sometimes it's actually quite painful.
How long did it take for you before you felt like you'd sort of made it or cracked it? The doors really open for you as an artist. When did that happen?
I mean, it happens in various stages. First, you've got to actually surrender to the fact of, And I was talking to a friend of mine who'd just finished writing a book, and he sweetly celebrated it as an act of will. He had a great will to do this. And I sweetly said, no act of will. It was an act of surrender to the deepest part of you. And you have to spend a long time unearthing and breaking apart all those things that are actually walls against your own life, And anyway, that was my cheeky response that in fact... So it's moments of surrender, So there's firstly the recognition that I was deeply unhappy. I was an art teacher and, in a Brisbane high school. And I don't know, there's something about stale Vegemite sandwiches being thrown at you. It's just, it wasn't my thing. Ultimately, I love teaching, but it was high school teaching. It wasn't, there's something more too prescriptive for this personality. So I couldn't engage with it. It was too structured. It was too about an outcome. So I had to surrender to the idea that I was deeply unhappy. Then I had to surrender to the idea that, damn it, if I do this thing called art, I might fail miserably. And then I had to surrender to the idea that it's better to have failed miserably than to go back to that bloody high school where I am suffering so deeply. And then I had to surrender to the idea that that I had to have the courage to write to apply to an art school, a proper, I was living in, it's a long story, Canada, and then I went to London, and it was just, I had to travel a lot, in fact, to dislodge myself, to get rid of certain ideas, as we all do. And then I inevitably had that moment where, but what do you make your work about? But that also is a really important question, because if you're, one method is actually to sit still. By the way, I wasn't meditating at that point, but it was just sort of like, well, it is really deeply what is connecting you to this world, and what is your deepest question? What is the thing that you must know? Otherwise, your life is not worth living. It's that kind of, and you surrender to that. And so you just keep surrendering. And then eventually, maybe, if you're lucky, people take notice, and maybe they don't. And that's, there's no guarantee. And even though people might consider me as successful, even when I was, beginningly successful, didn't mean I was making any money. Didn't mean, it was, so it's just this absolutely faithful journeying step by step and encountering the thing that's needed in your soul right now. And if eventually it happens that you do whatever this might be and other things, well, that's fantastic. But it is really the meeting of yourself, stepping up to yourself every single moment of your life.
And have you had some setbacks along the way?
Always. Setbacks.
Do you see them that way, or do you have a different philosophy?
Of course, when things are disappointing, well, I can reframe it in a different way. My uni students used to ask, they used to say things like, oh, you know, like if I had a successful show or something, they'd be all happy for me. And I just say to them, good publicity and bad publicity, exactly the same, you know? One is just more pleasant than the other. If you actually get, and they're places, nice places to visit, you go visit them, but if you believe in any publicity at all about yourself, you will get stuck, you know? Like, oh, I am the greatest artist, is as imprisoning as I am the worst person in the universe. It is exactly the same prison. And the only place to be is the task and the wonder of the task that you're trying to attend to. Did I answer that question or not? I can't remember what the question was.
Because I come from a family of creatives. My mum and father, my brothers, like all artists. So I have a deep love and affection for art. I mean, going to Burning Man, just in awe of all the creativity and the diversity and just the spectacle of human ingenuity and just the human mind, what it can dream up. So I always have so much respect for someone who chooses the artist path, especially in this world, because I don't think there's any other profession that's more difficult to crack and to make. Acting's pretty hard, but I'd say being an artist is even more challenging.
Oh, let's not get into comparisons
about
how difficult things are. But you know, there are setbacks. There are times when you know, there I will call them art world setbacks, where you know, the art world is a very in an international and is a weird place of egos and as an artist you get trapped between I thought this was going on, but no, that's going on. But my work is over there. But hello, is anybody see my work at all? No. Okay, well, that was good. I'll just hide again for another 10 years. You know, it's just, it is, you know, I think the hardest things are really finding, I'm going to say, the courage to meet this, because you have to. And the hardest thing is dealing with people who are supposed to be representing you who don't get you. It's like one of my dealers who is very famous, who will remain nameless. I told her, you know, very sincerely about the necessity for me to start why I had started this Zen practice, the craziness of it, and because it meant there was a huge shift in my work. Okay, so it became one thing, and there was a huge shift, and everybody in the art, you know, was going, what is this Zen thing with Lindy? You know, and one critic actually said, oh, she's just doing it to be fashionable. You're like, I'm thinking, you fucking asshole. Have you ever gone to a Zen retreat, had to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning, be in the dojo by 4:15, meditate till 6:15, you know, you get 4 minutes break, you get, you know, a pit toilet, you get a shower every second day, and, you know, and at 9, if you're lucky, because the Zen master can release you, you can go to sleep. You know, I really wanted to take that critic and say, you come with me for a week and see how it is for you. So, you know, those things are difficult. And so, oh yeah, when I said the bit of that story, when I was sort of and I'd struggled, there was struggle anyway, and I just said to this person, I said, look, it's a really important change in my work. It's a really significant development. And she just looked at me and said, I don't believe you, you're just lazy. I was like, oh, I just came out with, with my, the rawness of my heart, because this is so important, and you just told me that I'm the laziest artist in your stable. So those things are difficult, you know, and you can only just go, that's bad publicity. I just have to go back into my studio and I have to, again, meet the thing that drives my life.
Mm. Did you say you have strong belief in yourself, or do you have just strong surrender?
I had no belief in myself. No, it's a really interesting thing. There's kind of all right, I might even, I'm going to say no belief in yourself is better. Actually, there's a Zen saying, better to have nothing than something good. Meaning you might have an idea that you have self-confidence and stuff, but even that's a trap. You know, ultimately it's about going into the land of actually not knowing, actually just having the courage to meet what you don't know and and just be that and see what will happen. And the reason that I actually love doing this kind of work right now is because it's got nothing to do with me. You know, the burning, like I have no idea really how intense that flame is going to be, or the ultimate pattern that's going to be created. Or if I put things out in the rain, she is the best artist, you know, I can't do this stuff. I don't know what I'm trying to say, except that there's just a deep intimacy with one's practice you have to cultivate at all times, and that also is meditation.
So with these visions, with your creations, I'd love if you could share like where they come from, how they come to you. Share us a little bit of your process, because I know every artist has a different process.
All right. I really hate it. Okay, I used to teach at Sydney University, and I taught at Sydney College of the Arts, which I loved, and I loved teaching. But there is a bit of bullshit in art schools that, you know, are conceptual. And so, you know, I was always touted as a conceptualist and an intellectual artist, and I'm not. Because I have this fundamental and absolutely unshakable belief that it doesn't start with your concept, it starts with your experience that has made you curious about something. And it is a Buddhist thing. It's not, and I'll just go through the Buddhist bit, which is, you know, you have an experience. That experience is either good or bad, you can call it, so that you have either a good feeling, a not so good feeling, or a kind of neither good nor bad feeling. If it's a good feeling, you grasp after it, and you know, it's a bad feeling, you want to push it away, and thus begins the journey of your spiritual life. So, okay, what I'm trying to say there is that it's the experiencing of our lives that is important, and that's how we get to become artists. That is the first thing. So I hated it at Sydney College of the Arts when we're teaching, critical theory. And I mean, it's all has its place. I'm not, but you know, it's not me coming up with an idea. It's me listening to what it is in the world in me that is happening. That's where it starts. And so that process you can call intuition. And so I realised after, I used to have these, well, I still do, it's just these, it took me about 30 years to actually accept this process, because I'm stupid that way. But it's just that it's as simple. There is this curiosity that for me, you know, for instance, the colour black became really important, and I still wear black in honour of that. Became really important, and I'm going, what the fuck, Lindy? You know, and why are you doing these images? And what's this? You know, it's just because if that image, or you know, that is calling me, I have to work with it, because by the working with it, it allows the deeper question to come up. And I'm going to talk about materiality, because we don't have another 10 years to talk about, because I can talk a long time. But I guess in the process of my work, something has happened, or a curiosity, an intense curiosity has developed about a colour, a materiality, a form or something. And I have argued with that in my brain. I've said, you know, one of my more funny examples is like the colour orange coming up and going, I hate orange. It's just such a loud and, you know, gaudy colour. Why would I, you know, work on orange? But it was really important. And in my painting practice, which was my first practice really, because now I do other things, it's just that I was attracted to the colour black, which actually was the colour of mystery and death and grief and all of this sort of stuff, which I actually hadn't understood how deeply was locked in here. But through the working through of this, the questions were allowed to come through. Then there was red. Red is the colour of blood. Sunset is colour of life. And, you know, it went from black to red to blue, which is the colour of spirituality. And I'm trying not to list the whole damn things, just because it could be too long. But in every instance, it was it met a very deep question. And one of the most poignant colours was this jade green. Okay, and by the way, this sequence of colours began to build the language that I was using. And one day I was walking in Chinatown in Sydney and I saw this really beautiful jade bracelet and I thought, I've got to have that. And I found out it was like $900 and I thought, I can't have that. But I don't know, I managed to get it because it really spoke to me. And it kept saying the words, "This is the ocean of birth and death." And I kept saying, "This is stupid, Lindy. How can this be the colour of the ocean of birth and death?" I should have been, this is about the sixth colour in the sequence of intuitions, and anyway, so I do get it. And as turns out, about 2 weeks later, my brother called me to say that my nephew had cancer. And it was a really bad cancer. And I flew up to Brisbane immediately, and Ben was about 18 at the time, and nobody had been in his, as a teenager, nobody had been inside his bedroom for 10 years at least, because, private sacred space. Talk about sacred space, the teenage boys, But wonderfully, Ben took me by the hand. He said, "Lindy, I got to show you something. Come to my room." And I walked into his room and it was absolutely plastered with this green. And I thought, okay, this is very interesting. I'm not going to, this is a bit weird, but I'm not going to say anything. And he said, "Oh, Auntie Lindy, this is just my favourite colour." I went, "Oh, great, it's lovely, it's beautiful, And thinking, I'm going, ocean of birth and death, Ben's got cancer. What the? But it was about that, and I can't tell you why. I can't tell you, anything other than, well, that's the way it happened. And Ben took out, underneath his bed, a sheaf, this thick of drawings that he'd done. And he said, "Auntie Lindy, I just want to be an artist when I've got." And we already kind of knew he didn't. Well, yes, you can hope, but the reality, the oncologist's reality was. A year, 18 months, and this is incurable. And so, he takes this sheaf of drawings out, and I just sort of know my job really is just to make sure that Ben understands absolutely that his talent is part of him and it can never be taken away. And so he was living in Brisbane, I was living in Sydney, and he would come down every second month, and we would just play in my studio. And that's how, but there's more I want to say. It's just that there's this philosopher, Merleau-Ponty, who said that we know colour in the world because we live in the world. Like, we know the colour red because, as I say, the red of our blood, the red of the red lipstick your mother wore to your auntie's wedding, the red of the carnation. Colours, materials really, are already embedded and with meaning, because we live in the world in relation to them. So what I've discovered actually in this process of being an artist is not, I used to think, you're either a painter or a sculptor or this. Well, I can't be any of just those things because it's materiality that really interests me. And so what I mean by that is that when... an example of materiality and meaning is that if you as an artist choose to make an ice sculpture, that already has meanings of impermanence, ephemera, cold, blah, 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 melting, change. You make a sculpture out of stone, granite, it already has this meaning of, I'm not going to say permanence, but solidity and sort of a sense of the indestructible. So you just got these two materials in the world and they already are magnificent with meaning. So you just got to listen to their meaning. And I'll be the Taoist, here. And that is, in Taoism, you must first learn to completely hear what this is saying before you act on it. So the process of my work is literally simply to hear. And to hear the materiality, to hear what it wants to do, and to get out of the way of that.
Beautiful. And can you tell us about when Zen started for you, your relationship with Zen Buddhism?
You want the wacky story?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
of course.
Okay,
Mr. Soma.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a story that I kind of, I've only just started to tell because it is, for some, a bit wacky, and it was certainly wacky for me. So the way I came to Zen was I have suffered terribly from headaches all of my life. And in this particular occasion, 30-something years ago, I had a headache that lasted 10 days. And my habit still is to swim every morning. And so, I'd drag myself to Sydney University pool for these 10 days and I'd sort of swim, but the pain was still there. The 10th day, I couldn't get out of the car because I just thought, I'll throw up if I just move an inch. And then I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, I could try this thing called meditation. I don't know what that is. Some of my friends do it, but I haven't done it. And I thought, well, maybe if I just close my eyes and just try to just be with it or not judge it, or I didn't even know what the terms were. And so I just closed my eyes and 3 things happened. First of all, there was nothing but blood red, in my vision. It's like, that was pretty intense. And the second thing was this enormous love for my students. Not me loving them. It was just this huge container of love for these students who I happened to have some, and that was but I knew that I cared deeply. So that was okay, all right, well, what's this headache about? I don't love you that much that you should be giving me this much pain. But the third thing that happened, which was really the most wacky and significant thing, which was a voice came and said, Lindy Lee, you will be paralysed for the rest of your life until you have complete obedience to the way. To which I said, fuck off. Because you would, And my words exactly were, fuck off. I'm a late 20th century woman. I don't do obedience. Blah, 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 blah. Get that. And then the pain just, and I went, okay, fine, whatever. I'll, just get me, release me enough from this pain so I can just get home. So I got myself home, and it was the time of telephone books. So I got out the yellow pages and looked up, or was it white pages? Anyway, I looked up Zen because I didn't know how to spell Vipassana or anything like that. I was deeply ignorant of Buddhism. I had no idea. So anyway, Zen, I said, look, Sydney Zen Centre is in the next suburb. Oh, well, maybe I'll go there tonight. And I went there, and simultaneously, 2 things. I wanted to throw up for 2 reasons. First off, it was so confronting going into a meditation hall with a Buddha on an altar. Because, I had spent my whole life defining myself against my ancestry. Absolutely. So there I am going, and they're all prostrating in front of the Buddha. They're all doing these bows, this incense, they're doing chanting. Get me out of here. And the other simultaneous thing, which was like, no, Lindy, this is your home. You have come home. And so I sat on that cushion, and indeed, I had no idea how to meditate, but the sense of coming home was so profound. I really did want to throw up. It was against everything my ego consciousness had decided I was. And apparently I had to get rid of that. And I just found, and I realised, and there was, early morning meditation. I said to myself, because I can be willful, I was going to go, I am not going to go unless I find myself waking up at 5:45 every morning and being in the car on my way. If that happens, I will do it, but I'm not going to set any alarm. Anyway, guess what happens? Every morning I find myself going to the dojo, doing early morning meditation. And I also find myself taking Jukai, which is a ceremony of precepts, 6 months into my Zen practice, which is unheard of, but I didn't know that. Because, this is a precept. It's a very deep and important ceremony and commitment. And that's another story. But my Zen, there was the visiting Zen teacher, because there was no Zen master in Australia at that time. I wrote to him about this experience that I had, and I said, can I do Chikai? And he said, yep, you're fine. Anyway, yeah.
So what started to happen to you as a result of exploring Zen?
Yeah, then, as part of the story of, 6 months into this career as a Zen student, I go to my first retreat, and I'm going to do Chikai in my first retreat. Like, again, I am astonished at my audacity or stupidity. So, I had sort of done short retreats, like, weekend retreats, and I had sat rigorously morning and night, for a couple of hours every day. And I thought, how hard can this be? Yeah, exactly. I like that laughter. So I go there and I hate it. Oh my God. Oh, literally the princess in me, is going, I do not like the fact that I'm not having a hot shower every morning. I do not like the pit dunnies. I don't like this camping business. And oh my God, the vegetarian food is just, but the food was terrible, by the way. But it was also, we were in this pokey cottage, and I was put next to the cabbage bin. So all, I was smelling rotten cabbage during, going. And, but importantly, this is really important, it beat me. It really beat me. So I remember after about day 4, I remember sort of saying, I have bragged to all of my friends how wonderful Zen practice is and how enriching and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? I give up. I'm never going to come back to this place ever again. I can't do this. I simply can't do this. But that was really important. It did break me, because those first 4 days, it was my ego and my will making sure that, and showing off, showing off to myself. Who was I? I was a crap sitter, I had no, erect back or anything, I was a fidgeter, and anyway. But the thing that was really important was that it did break me. And I remember walking to my tent. I hadn't eaten very well, much over the past few days. I had a bag of apples in my tent. I remember grabbing an apple, walking outside and saying, actually probably tearfully, and biting into the apple, I absolutely give up. I can't do this. I absolutely can't do this. And in that moment, the universe exploded. The complete surrender that was required, the complete giving up. This I has nothing to do. And then another expression was, and in that moment I became fetchable. The universe fetches you, and those experiences, very, very profound experiences of universe, no separation from universe, no cell in your body is separate, no breath, everything was ripped away. And then I must say also, wondrously, the terror started. I don't know, this could make sense. It makes sense to a Zen student anyway. But when this happens, the deeper the experience, the more terror comes up, because you really don't exist. You absolutely don't. Like every construction that I am Lindy Lee, I am this, and I am the worst, but I am that, that is not there. It doesn't exist. So what the fuck exists? And that is a really good question. And so you spend, decades really exploring, well, what really is the nature of this existence? And it is the best question. And this is actually, and I will say, those experiences happened 30 years ago, and it took me 20 years of sitting with it to begin to produce the work of Cosmos that I can now do. It had to bake for a long time, because it couldn't be about me it couldn't be about me, basically. And so a lot of clearing had to go through. And now I just play.
And so what are the key teachings that you've been exposed to that have touched you from Zen? Because a lot of people don't know what Zen Buddhism is.
Right.
And how is it distinct from other forms of Buddhism? And, what is the, I guess it's a terrible way to express it, but like what is the goal? What is Zen wanting to awaken in an individual?
Okay. That meditation is, it can be, of course, about being in pleasant states, conditions. It can be about peace and equanimity, and they're all wonderful, and they're actually, they're great side effects. But for me, the absolute fundamental thing about meditation, it is the vehicle through which this little being, this entity, is microcosm to that which is vast, okay? And back again, all right? So it is about this action of actually realising that you are an intrinsic part, that you can't be separated out. And it's a process of, dismantling a lot of ideas. So that's why you meditate. I'm talking to the, already an audience, to see the habits of mind that you're imprisoned in, I'm not going to go through all the things. To be present, to understand that only this moment exists. But curiously, I love this paradox. It has taken the absolute eternity of history to construct every single one of us. And yet this moment will never come again. I just love that paradox. And this moment will never come again. And yet it has taken the entirety of history to create this moment. The vastness of that and our belonging to that is, you can't underestimate that. And another thing which I've just recently kind of come up on. By the way, I'm stealing a lot of. There's a Zen teacher called Joan Sutherland Roshi, not our Joan Sutherland, but she's a wonderful. So I've just been listening to a lot of her Dharma talks recently, and I'll leave you with this one, which I love, is that as physicists will tell you, 96% of the universe is dark matter, is unknowable. Only 4% is light. Only 4% of the entire universe can ever be known in this minute, in this second. So actually what we are is a deep mystery. And I love this expression, if we can just lie back into the mystery of that darkness and be comfortable there, and to be open to whatever comes, and to also to gloriously celebrate those light sparkling bits of foam on this vast ocean of cosmos, which we also happen to be. But I just love the imagery of just of cultivating the ease to be able to lie back and be supported by the depth of this mystery. So, yeah, that stuff.
Yeah. And so as an art teacher, but also you're very much into life philosophy, for the people in this room, because there are definitely artists in the room, I'm aware of that, but there's also a lot of people who aren't artists. But as you were speaking, you can relate very much a lot of what you were saying to their individual non-artistic lives, because we all have different vocations and careers and aspirations. What would be your advice to people who feel like they're a little bit sort of stuck, or they're not really aligned to their truth or life purpose right now? How do people kind of break out of that?
First of all, that you're here, there's a start. So there's a curiosity, so follow that curiosity. But just as I said, and sounds like such a cliche, but I'm not going to apologise for it. But it is the only job in town is to be thoroughly who you are. That is the only job in town. And if in this moment it is to be thoroughly confused and you're hurt or whatever it is, That is the job you have at the moment. And it's by following those, to be thoroughly that, with as much compassion and vastness of heart, then curiously some alchemy happens and some seed of growth and direction occurs. Anyway, that's my theory.
Could you have ever imagined that you would be where you are today?
No.
Yeah.
Never. Never. I'm sort of used to be saying right now, yeah, I'm an artist, but it took me 35 years to even, I'm an artist. I'm sort of an artist. No, and you can't ever, I guess it's good to have it's important to have aspiration, but I met this young man, and he was 21, and he had his whole life figured out. He had his fiancée, he had the block of land, he had the job that he was going to pursue, and it was like he had his entire life. By the time he was 35, he had everything was marked. And I thought, my God, I hope that gets broken. I didn't say it to him, but no, you can't, to live your life fully, you can't have that, I'm going to be this by the time of, at all. You can only, have an openness and just hope it's going to go okay. But really be diligent and sincere about it and have fun in a good way. Yeah.
Is impermanence a big part of Zen philosophy?
Oh, yes, of course it is.
Yeah. Why is that an important thing for human beings to understand and contemplate?
That is a huge question. Well, first of all, we're going to die. Okay, that's a big thing. My first Zen teacher, Aitken Roshi, when I was doing a retreat in Hawaii. Zen retreats are generally, silent. So it's 7 days. The only time you talk is with your Zen teacher. But for this occasion, there was an open, dialogue. People could come and ask questions. So some poor guy, and I felt for him the whole session because he was really struggling. Like we were all struggling, but this guy was really struggling. So the posture, the pain, can I, really? Why am I, the whole he was. Anyway, he went up to Aitken Roshi and he said, "Okay, we're born, we come out of the void, and then we die." And then Aitken Roshi went, "No. You don't come, you have never left the void," meaning birth and death are happening every single moment. They are fabric to your existence. So impermanence basically is the fabric of our existence. Another way of describing it is time, There's a beautiful piece of writing by Dogen, the Zen philosopher, who says, and I'm going to trash it, is like even the lifting of your arm is an enactment of time. Me sipping water is time itself. So the process of our lives is the embodiment of time. So I'm afraid there is birth and death in every moment. And so that's why impermanence is important. And by the way, impermanence also means fullness, and plenitude. Like in this moment, so many things are rising and falling. So many things are coming into existence and falling out of existence. And it's marvellous. And yes, my husband died 2 years ago. And yes, that is painful. That is painful. And this too is it, a Zen Buddhist would say, this too is your life. Embrace it all. And somehow the impermanence and being of time is all part of that. Sometimes I confuse myself too. Sorry. Okay.
But it seems that impermanence connects you to what is permanent and real and unchanging.
Exactly.
Which is source consciousness.
Yeah. So there's a kind of deeper thing that one, in the deeper well, in the bottomlessness of that well, there is something that is unchanging and eternal. And one of my favourite koans is the stone woman gives birth by night. So koans, by the way, are these very mysterious words like the stone woman gives birth by night. And you're supposed to sit with that and go, huh? But they're beautiful things. So they're metaphors. And like one way of interpreting that, like the stone woman is dead. Like there's no life to it. Like it's still, it's kind of like, and yet, but it's talking about that really deep part of existence of that well. And yet that seemingly dead stone gives birth to something infinite and vast. It's like I'm ruining the poetry for everybody, but yeah, just getting back to that still thing.
Yeah. So how did your art change before and after Zen? To the person looking at it.
Oh, to the person looking at it, it probably went from Lindy was doing these incredibly. In the 80s, I was working with imagery from Western art history, which was a thing at that time, and I did it for my own reasons, and that was because of identity, because I needed to figure it out. And I actually, however these things happen, I was very successful very early on. And so I was really quite known for these paintings, and they were all part of, the discussion about Australian identity and blah, 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 blah. And then, the work changed to family, and then the work changed to burning. And so people on the outside were saying, what the, because, and also, people, you as an artist, people will follow your work and they will appreciate, and if you change, well, first of all, they'll complain, oh, she's still doing the same thing. Then if you change, they go, why is she doing that? Like, why can't she go back? It's like you can't win, so therefore you don't win. You just so I don't think that people necessarily, or anybody necessarily, understood the necessity for these changes, except that they happened. But a really good thing. So a couple of years ago, I had a survey show at the MCA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney, and so that was a 40-year career, 4 decade, yeah. So it's a long time, and actually the best thing was that people, including me, could actually trace the path, and it was a coherent path. Might have been this way, but the path was very coherent to what I do now. So, yeah, anyway.
And so for people who don't know where your art is, can you tell us some of the places around the world where you have pieces?
Okay, so right now I've got a show at Tweed Regional, so go there. I think it's on at least for a few more weeks. So Shanghai, Beijing, New York, Washington, Middle East. It's in, the usual standard thing. It's in all the major collections in Australia. It's in all the major, I don't know. I hate answering that question, actually.
But it's, it's beautiful too that your work's so appreciated.
That's a piece of good publicity that I'll let in for a little while.
Yeah.
But I won't live there.
Yeah. And what's taking place in Canberra? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
A very big sculpture. Right, so this is 6 meters.
6 meters, yeah.
Okay, so I'm making a sculpture that's 4.5 meters tall, and it'll be about, what's the diameter?
12.
Okay, so similar to this size, but maybe just a metre and a bit shorter. And it's going to be an Ouroboros, or a snake swallowing its own tail. And it's a huge engineering feat, and it will, I don't even know where, well, Ouroboros, it's the snake swallowing its own tail. It's the beginning, it's the end, it's about eternal return. It's about the intimacy of humanity within cosmos. It's all about, and there's a lot of complaint, or not a lot, but there is a stream of complaint that it's costing so much, because it is $14 million. And every time every time I started to do another drawing, the budget kept going up, and I was getting sicker and sicker, thinking, oh, it's never going to happen. But, like 100,000 holes have to be hand cut. Okay, those holes will produce burrs at the back. That has to be sanded back. It'll take 135 people 2 and a bit years to construct. It'll have to be road trained down to Canberra. The little lake that it's going to has to sit on and there was a bit of discussion about that this last week, believe me, because, well, I won't go into it, but it's just because water features are very expensive. There's the fact that Australia didn't have the technology to make this, but the UAP, the company I work with who are going to make it, have invested in the technology so that we can make it in Australia, because we always outsource our stuff. So, it's not just, that $14 million is also about bringing back jobs to Australia, bringing back something. And at 14 million, it's still really tight. I mean, really tight, because of so many unknown things,
And is it like building a home? You start with this and then it just blows out?
It's like that. And one of the things is also, it's going to have this huge shed built around it to hide it. And then it has to be mirror polished on site. And for 6 months, a crew has to live there to do that. So that's, one of the reasons for why it's a huge thing. Yeah, I hope it works out.
Yeah, so do we. So what a legacy piece.
Sorry?
What a legacy piece.
Yeah, it is a legacy piece. And as by coincidence or not, wonderfully, the country around Canberra is snake country. So I didn't know that. And because it is, I've been working with Auntie Rosie so that the story of the snake of, sorry, I don't remember the First Nations name for the country, but, it becomes absorbed as part of the story. So I'm getting to learn all sorts of things, because I also have this thing that ancient Taoism and Indigenous dreaming share so much similarities, and we've been having these discussions. So, that bit is so much fun. What is it that exists?
Yeah, what conclusion have you come to? Been contemplating on it for a few decades. Give it to us.
Well, at least Lindy has noticed that inside Lindy are about 1,000 different, like there's a tribe of us in here. So what is it that exists right now in this tribe of us that's in here, So it's like, what exactly exists is the moment-by-moment reality of what we're experiencing. So there's no one answer, and there can't be one answer. It's the process of living. It's a process of one moment emptying into the next minute, and perhaps developing enough awareness, consciousness to observe that I am a being of a tribe of 10,000 million, actually. And this 10,000 million are also connected to this other 10,000 million people that are now in this room. I'm not sure I'm making any sense, but it's not there is, in that question, what is it that exists? There is no one answer, and that's the liberating thing. When I was in China, I really struggled with not being Chinese enough, okay? All right? I'm never going to be Chinese enough. My accent for a start. But I used to go to China, and with this question, because I felt so divided, so torn between ancestry and birthplace. And I had a cup of coffee with a young artist, and he kept saying, my work is traditional Chinese work. And I kept looking at it and thinking, but these are nightclub scenes of strippers and, okay, you're telling me that, I'm thinking flower and, water paintings. But what he was talking about was the materials. He was using Chinese brushes. He was grinding his own inks, and that he was upholding a tradition of some kind. And I don't know, something just occurred to me in that moment. I was never going to be Chinese like him. You know, I just, he was born. Oh, look, there's so many variations on this story. I'm just trying to stick to one. But, you know, I actually finally realised I could never be authentically Chinese in that sense, ever. Ever. And at last I could let go of one sense of singular identity. At last I understood. We are all made up of multiple parts that come into this crazy dance and play with each other and argue and do this and that. And so there isn't any singular answer to it. And that is magnificent. And it's liberating. It was so liberating. I didn't have to be properly Chinese. You know, I can't describe it. It was just like, I can't be, at last. But I'm free to play now. That there have been times in my life that have been extremely dark, okay? Suicidally dark, I will say. And I actually mean that. So the journey is, you know, I don't have a formula for that, but I guess because the more one embraces the idea, the Zen expression is, you know, what is Buddha nature? Well, you know, hit your hand on the, you know, this too is it. You know, the fact that Rob died 2 years ago and there are massive bouts of grief, this too is it. You know, the fact that I'm actually having a great time with this audience, this too is it. It's just, it's trying to grow the capacity to embrace it all. Now, okay, so Huineng, who is the sixth ancestor of Zen, and I'm bastardizing his, he said, under the open sky, you know, there are bushes and trees and grasses and birds and fishes, good people, bad people, great teachings, profane teachings. All of this is your original face. All of this is you. And the koan in that is, and how are you with that? How will you embrace that? How will you be with that? And the more you learn to be with every single thing, no matter how painful, and, you know, sometimes it is, the more openness and, you know, compassion you have. Compassion is a huge thing. That is actually compassion. What compassion is the capacity and the tenderness and the willingness to hold it all, you know? And when you can do that, maybe it's possible that sometimes you can be, you know, you see things in a spectrum. So, you know, in the heartache, in the terrible things, the bitter loneliness that, you know, we will feel at times, there is also the joy, there is also the wonder, there is also the deep mystery, there is also that fabulous piece of chocolate you had, you know, last night or whatever. You know, by becoming awake and aware of each moment of your life, somehow it becomes lighter, because it's not all about, you know, I can hang on to as many dark things as I'm the tragedy queen here. But what I'm trying to say is it's the capacity, it's the compassion and the willingness to embrace everything with as much openness as possible and know that everybody else in the world is trying to do the same.
Thank you. Very inspiring.
Oh, thank you for putting up with it.